Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So, before anything else, I will address the elephant in the room, and that is, yes, no more long hair. Not a whole lot of hair for that matter at all. So the long hair had served its purpose, and with it getting warmer now and getting into the beginning of summer, it was time for the long hair to go. So what I did is obviously had it shaved off, and the hair will be donated to the charity Children with Hair Loss, so it can be made into wigs for children with cancer or other illnesses that cause loss of hair. So not looking for props or anything like that. I just did not want the hair to go to waste, and that seemed like the best way to do it. But with that being out of the way, and that being said, we are on the way up to Accelerated yet again to do some additional plumbing and to wrap up some other portions of the project. So you can see my boxes back there. I have some new parts that are going to be hopefully installed on the car today, and go see exactly how much I can accomplish on this trip. So I'm going to get back to driving, and we will reconvene when I arrive up there, and hopefully I can do some filming as I'm in the middle of working today, but we'll see how it goes. So I will see you guys up there, and we'll keep going from there. Just finishing up here at Accelerated for the day, and made a decent bit of progress. Again, it may not seem like a whole lot, but with the limited time that I have available here, any bit that I can get done is a massive victory. So the first thing we'll go over is the fuel surge tank. So I went ahead and I got all of the fasteners fastened down on the lid. That is solid on there. And I have 3 of the 4 lines made. This is the fuel feed line from the surge tank to the mechanical pump. This is the feed from the lift pump in the rear up to the surge tank. And this is the return from the regulator over there to the surge tank. So this line here that does not have this hose end here that does not have a line to it is the return from the surge tank to the cell in the rear. However, when I ordered the materials, I guess the parts to make these lines, I neglected to order a 20-foot section of number 8 hose, and I don't have enough here to make that line. So I'll have to wait until the next time that I come up here to build that line, but the other 3 are done, and that's still a massive victory. So they all snake through behind the cylinder head here. If you can see that, we have the return line right here. We have the feed line from the surge tank to the mechanical pump right here, and this line right here is the feed from the lift pump to the surge tank. So all of those lines are done. We only have 1 more to build, and then all of the fuel plumbing is done again. But that will be a job for the next time I come up here, when I don't forget to order that section of number 8 hose. I also went ahead and I was able to get the dry pump drive situated and squared away. So everything as far as the balancer is tight now, and we obviously have a belt from the drive mandrel on the front of the damper that you can see that I'm poking right here. That goes over to the drive gear on the dry sump pump itself. So I ended up switching out the drive gear on the dry sump pump. It was a 32 tooth Moroso gear that did not have a belt guide on it. I switched over to a 33 tooth Jones gear that does have a belt guide on the outsides of it. If you guys can see right here, maybe that shiny aluminum on the outside that I'm poking right there, that is a belt guide, and that will help prohibit the belt from making its way off of that drive pulley should it be misaligned or anything like that. So in going to 1 additional tooth on that drive pulley as well, I was able to eliminate the necessity for a tensioner of some sort. The belt is just the right size and everything is spaced just the right distance apart. That, I don't know if you can see right here, but there's just that little bit of flex, and that's exactly what you're looking for. And very stoked, very happy that I don't need to come up with some sort of a tensioner, build another part, another thing to do. Eliminated all of that, that will drive perfectly fine. We'll have oil pressure and all will be well on that front. Coming around to the back of the car, I went ahead and I mounted the battery box, and if you look at it, it's a little bit catawampus on this corner right here. I will end up needing to loosen it out, put some sort of a spacer underneath of it to cause it where it isn't getting skewed one way or another due to an uneven surface that it's mounted on. But I went and I put 4 riv nuts in the back of the car here. It's fastened on there solid, and I obviously need to go in and put the actual hold down bracket and its respective hardware and everything like that on there. And this is the rest of the hardware. It did not come in a vibrant bag, but it's a spare one that I had, so that's where I put everything that way. But battery will reside right here. Gives it nice, easy ability to be serviced. Gives it a nice run for the battery cables. You can see the negative right here, and then the positive is somewhere around here. At least here is the line for the alternator, and those I'll have to drill 2 holes in the side of the battery box to run those lines in, fasten them to the battery. But at least the box is mounted for the time being, and can figure out drilling the holes and everything else that goes along with it again the next time that I come up here. Underneath of the car here, I swapped out my 12 ORB to 12 AN fitting to a 12 ORB to number 10 fitting right here, and this is a number 10 hose end on this right here. And I do not have a hose running from the fuel cell sump to the lift pump currently, as I will need to figure out either a different location to mount the pre-pump filter, or I'll need to get a different pre-pump filter, as the one that I have is quite long and it doesn't leave me with enough space to attach a hose, or to make a hose going from this fitting right here with a straight hose end on the fuel filter body itself, and then to make a hose that goes up to the lift pump. There just is not enough space for that, so I'll need to figure out something for that. I have an idea of how I can use what I already have, but I need to play around with that the next time that I come up here, and I might need to do some modification to that bumper support bracket, but ran out of time to do that today, and I'm frankly quite beat at this point, so I'm just about ready to get out of here and head back down my way. And then as far as the stuff that Russ has accomplished, he went ahead and wired in all the steering wheel buttons. I believe this one here will be the bump, this one up here will be the trans brake, and this one here will be the boost scramble. Those are all tied into a Deutsch connector right down here. Obviously we have the multi-function light switch that is all wired in as well, and he left enough length on all of these legs of the harness for when the dash is being installed, that fiberglass dash, it will be able to sit farther into the cabin to make it easier to hook all of these connections up when if the dash ever needs to be removed and then reinstalled. So beyond that, we have a switch panel now, and the switch panel is pretty sweet. It's going to mount in the center of the fiberglass dash, and these are all the switches that we have for it. So all of these switches, the same as that multifunction light switch over there, these switches are all from Racewire Solutions, and they do a really nice job with the aesthetics of the switches. Are very nice, and they're backlit as well, so this line on each one of the switches will light up when it's being activated, and the text in each one of them, and you can customize the text. You can see the ones that I have here, but within reason they can print anything on these. All of that will light up and be able to see everything on the switch panel even at night. So some of them, like starter here, that's a momentary switch main power. That is a latching switch. Water pump's latching, traction control is latching. Reverse, momentary, latching, latching, momentary, latching, and these two ones down here are momentary as well. So these are all, I think, single pole switches. They also offer dual pole switches, which what that would mean on a rocker switch like this, its home position would be in the center, and then you would click up for one function, click down for another function. So you can essentially have 2 functions with the same switch. I didn't have any functions that I wanted to implement a switch like that into this car setup. So all these are either just single pole latching or momentaries, but that is exactly what I wanted, and that will work out perfectly for this setup in this car. So this switch panel will mount in the center of the fiberglass dash, and if you know much about these cars, the dash kind of hedges over towards the driver. They always make the comparison to a fighter jet cockpit. These will sit where I can reach them. We already tested with the dash in, and sitting with my butt as far back in the seat as I could put it, can still reach all these switches without issue. And the fact that they're all labeled and strategically placed on this panel, everything should be good there and shouldn't ever have an issue with losing switches and losing what I'm doing, even under duress, as I will be getting ready to make a pass with this car. The last thing that I did, it was a small little project, but a necessary one, and it gives me time to give a little bit of a tech tip for you guys. So I went ahead and I put this 90-degree fitting for the fuel pressure sensor, just to make it so the sensor was able to be plugged in more easily. And in looking at that, we also have these two sensors here. The bottom one right here, oops, grab that one in a minute. This is the nitrous pressure sensor, and wherever I end up putting the nitrous solenoid, this will thread into it and tell us what the pressure through the nitrous line is. And the one I want to talk about is this one right here, which is the map sensor. Now, you can thread the map sensor into the bottom of the intake manifold. However, I did not want to do that. You think about an engine operating, or an engine in operation rather, is just a system of controlled explosions, and those explosions cause vibrations and everything else to go through every component that's bolted to it as it's in operation. So you can destroy sensors that way or get faulty sensor data. So what we're going to do with this is to mount it remotely somewhere up here on likely the strut tower or wherever I can find a bit of unused surface area, a bit of unused real estate in the engine bay there, and that will prevent the harsh vibrations going through the engine from destroying that sensor or giving faulty readings and causing the tune to go awry. So I didn't get a chance to do that this time. Again, that's another thing I can do next time. I have the little 8th NPT union that I'll use for it, and then I need to check and make sure that I have airline fittings that I can use for that line as well. But at least we have a game plan for it, and it's something that I can knock out again when I'm up here next time, knocking out more portions of this project before we get the chance to fire it up. So that about wraps up everything I was able to accomplish while I was up here on this trip, and been here for quite a few hours at this point in time. I'm beat. I'm ready to get out of here and head back my way. So we will reconvene in a few seconds for you guys, but in a few days for me, back at the shop and continue work probably on the intercooler for the SC300. So I will see you guys then, and we'll knock out building some more parts, have some more fun, and see what else we can get into and get accomplished. We are back at the shop to continue working on the Lexus. So on the agenda for today is to make some progress on the new intercooler for it. So this is a Bell Intercooler's core, 4.5 inches thick, and I forget what the other dimensions are, but this will be the heart of the new intercooler for the SC300. So the first order of business will be to pull the old bumper, or not the old, but to pull the bumper skin off of the car. So let me put you guys down and I will get started on doing that, and then we can figure out how this thing will mount in there and where we go from there. The old intercooler is out and it has seen some better days. So you can see the modifications that I did here went from 4-inch down to 3-inch, and then on this side from 3-inch down to 2.5. So I did this before when these were just leftover parts from the Supra, and Didn't really care how it looked. Wanted to do it as cheaply as I possibly could. But now that I have the extra core here, have extra materials, and can actually do this more nicely, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we won't be tackling the actual intercooler tubing today, but these tubes, you can see how dented up that one is there. And if you guys can see here, that massive denting in on this, I guess, upper intercooler tube. It needs new intercooler tubes as well, but again, we're not going to be knocking that portion of the project out today. Today we'll focus on building the new intercooler. So this being out, and I guess I have locations with my old brackets as to where the new intercooler core can sit, I can go ahead, put the new core on the jack, get it in place, and figure out roughly where it's going to be located on the front of the Lexus here, mark out locations for the threaded bosses, get those welded on, and at that point we can go ahead and figure out how we're going to build the end tanks. After a bit of work, I have the intercooler core mounted in the front of the SC300. So there is what we are left with, and it uses 2 threaded bosses on the top side and 2 M8 125 bolts. And on the bottom side, I made this little tab that goes over to the lower core support. And this started out as 2 1/8-inch thick pieces of 2-inch wide aluminum strip stock that I welded together to make a piece of 1/4 inch. And if you see this weld right here, that is me fixing my screw up. So rather than hide it, I figured I would show you guys so maybe you can learn from it and learn what not to do. So when I made this bottom piece right here, I just put it on there, welded it, and when I went to reinstall it, I had installed this bracket upside down. So felt like an idiot, but it was easy to remedy. All I had to do was do a little bit of precision surgery with the angle grinder, and I was able to cut that piece out, invert it, weld it back on, and now it is held in the way that it should have been in the first place. So you've heard the phrase, measure twice, cut once. Well, the same thing goes for mocking things up. Mock up multiple times, so you don't end up having to cut your work apart. So now that we are at this point right here, I can go ahead and I can begin making the end tanks. And what we're going to use for the end tanks, I have a few of these 3/16 thick pieces of strip that I had bought. I forget what the purpose was for it, but these have been sitting around, not going to any better use for a little bit now. And we're going to give them purpose in being the end tanks for this intercooler. So I'm going to go get some lunch. When I get back from that, we can get started on crafting the end tanks, and hopefully by the end of the day, we'll have a completed intercooler for the SC300. We have the beginnings of our 2 end tanks, and what we did with these
If you see, it isn't perfectly square. This top side here is slightly narrower than the bottom side, and I wanted to experiment with building tanks that had this aesthetic to them. I don't think there'll be a massive performance benefit, or really any performance benefit or detriment for that matter, one way or another, but I just wanted to play around with some geometry and make tanks that are a little bit different than what I typically do. So now we need to make the bottom cap, and we need to make this top piece right here. So what I will do, this bottom piece will be pretty easy to make out of just those pieces of 3/16 sheet that we had. However, the top portion right here, I don't have enough 3/16 to make those pieces, but I do have 1/8 inch. So we'll make those top panels out of 1/8 inch, the bottom panels out of 3/16. Not ideal, but it'll get the job done, and it will be fine for the amount of boost that this car will see. So let me go ahead, get some materials over here, get these shapes drawn onto them, and from there we can knock the rest of this out and get ready to weld and finish this intercooler up. Both of the tanks are fully fabricated. I put the surface finish that I wanted on them, and we are now ready to weld. So let me go ahead, I'll get geared up, and we can start buzzing these things together. End tanks are now welded outside and inside on both of them. So the next thing to do, and the last order of business before these can be welded to the core itself, is to punch the holes in, which you can see I already have gone ahead and center punched, for the inlet and the outlet. So this thing will have a 2.5 inch inlet and a 3 inch outlet. And I say this now, but I don't plan on really putting a larger turbo on this car, trying to make 1,000 wheel or anything crazy like that. So 2.5 in, 3 out should be perfectly fine. And if I ever do decide that I want to go more than that, realistically I would need to build a new intercooler for it at that point in time. And then I can tailor a new intercooler to higher and more grandiose power goals. But without rambling anymore, I'll go ahead and punch these holes. I have a couple pieces of tubing somewhere around here that will serve as the inlet and outlet stubs once I put a bead rolled end on them. And at that point we can weld those, weld the core up, put it in the car, reassemble, and this will be another job completed. The inlet and outlet stubs are now on our end tanks. So inlet is 2.5, and these are welded both inside and outside. And then we have our outlet that is 3-inch, again welded outside, welded inside. And at this point, these are ready to be mated to the core. So I'll go ahead, bring this core over, fasten it in the vise, and we're going to do one of my favorite tricks with welding end tanks to intercoolers. I'll show you guys in a moment what exactly that is, but let me go ahead, get this core over here, and then we can go over that and finish up this intercooler. One last little bit of talking before I shut up and we finish this intercooler. So here is the little trick. And what I am doing is using pieces of 1/8 inch, and you can see right here, 1/8 inch thickness, 1/8 inch strip stock and scraps that are just sitting around here to space the end tank 1/8 of an inch off of the core. The reason for this, if I did not do that, then I'd be trying to weld through 3/16 plate and through the side of the core, neither one of which is going to provide the opportunity to get full penetration. Doing this, it's similar to what they do with industrial pipe welding, where they have a planned gap put on the joint that allows you to get full penetration by default if you are welding across the gap. So hopefully that makes sense. And now, without further ado, let me get these end tanks tacked on and we can get this intercooler wrapped up. And there is the final product of the SC300's new intercooler. So, like I said before, it's a 4.5 inch Bell intercooler, or Bell intercooler's core. And then I just built some simple sheet metal end tanks for it, simple tube stubs, in and out for it. And I'm really happy with how this came out. So I tried a few different things in terms of the welding techniques that I used, and they worked out exceptionally well. And I've checked multiple times throughout the process of building this. It clears the bumper skin, it clears everything else the way that it should. So this fits in here very nicely, and it will do its job exceptionally well whenever this thing is running and it's shoving compressed air through the intercooler and making power that way. So obviously, now that the new intercooler is completed, the next order of business will be to build new intercooler tubing. However, that is not a job for this video. It's late. I still have to edit this video this evening, and it's getting hot in here. I'm worn out for the day. So with that being said, that's going to be the end of this episode. So as always, thank you guys very much for tuning in and watching me take on these projects, whether it be big projects like all of the crazy custom parts for the Supra, or small projects like a one-day intercooler build. Hopefully you guys are getting some value out of this, and hopefully I'm not droning on too much and making these videos not entertaining and not educational for you. But with that being said, that's going to be the end of this episode. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next episode.